Welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're going to be talking about how to correct or possible corrections for our speedometer needle not working, getting stuck, and just any other potential problems that we could have. We have been experiencing some issues with a newer cluster in regards to the speedometer and it just getting stuck, and then what it'll do is it'll either not read, so it'll stay at below zero while the digital display reads out speed. All other gauges on this cluster work, but this one will either stay at zero or it will bounce like it's stuck and it can't actuate. So we ended up sourcing the stepper motor that's inside. It's a VDO stepper motor, and I will post the link in the description below for you guys to purchase it if it's something that you want to tackle. And we will go through all this stuff and pull it apart and show you guys exactly how these things go together. All right, let's get into it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is obviously disconnect your batteries. You're going to pull the trim off, and then you're going to pull the bolts that secure, or the screws that secure your instrument cluster IPC to your dash. There's 4 screws in the very top that you'll take out. They're torque screws. And then there's these 2 screws down here that will secure it. You'll pull it out, and then you'll end up disconnecting it, and then we'll get into actually pulling the cluster apart. All right, so we've got our instrument cluster torn apart here. We marked where the needles were. Hopefully that will help us just reposition the needles. Here are the differences between the metal shaft, which you would find at least in our case, we found it on the premium cluster, and then here is the clear shaft, which is found on, or has been found on, the base model cluster. So resistance values checked with a multimeter between these 2 contacts and these 2. These are the coils right here that you can see, and then this screw here just rotates through magnets or magnetism. So not really sure how these failed, but I can tell you this one here was super easy to turn in here, whereas this one is making full contact and it's pretty difficult to turn. So we replaced this one on one cluster, and that solved the problem with it getting stuck and ticking. And so this is the new one thanks to Tanin Auto. These stepper motors secure with these little tabs here, or prongs, and they're just kind of like push pins. There's a centerpiece that goes through here. There are these little pieces. They sit right in this recess, and then they get pushed in. These are the ones that are mounted behind the circuit board, and then on the base model they're surface mounted on the front side. So you'll see a difference between where the shaft comes out. On the metal shaft ones, they come out of this side, and on the clear shaft ones, they come out of the other side. And then these are mounted upside down on the base model, and then the premium model, they're mounted on the back side. All right, so we got everything back together. These needles are just barely put on, just so that way I think what's happening is, as you pull these needles off, I think if you, these shafts only have so much direction that they can travel up and down and then side to side. So if you pull on them too hard the wrong way, you potentially could damage the internal components of these, whether it's right here where this gear no longer contacts the screw, or whatever. So what I would like to try to do, and what I would recommend, is you just barely put these needles on and then plug the instrument cluster in. We have a monitor that checks certain things, so it'll check RPM, or it'll, I guess, read out RPM, right? We generally know how much fuel we have in the truck right now. So, you know, if it's on E before you start it, your needle needs to say E, and then if it's, you know, obviously full, it's full. Temperature is pretty relative, so you'd have to determine what the readout is here on this gauge and figure out like what the temperature is. This was the last time it was out of the truck. It was reading at this reading, so I would say just make sure you take a picture and you mark what that reading is, so that way you can get the needle positioned exactly where it was. Let's see, tachometer, we have the engine speed readout on the monitor, and then the speedometer should read out once we plug it in. It should read out to 0, so this needle should go down to here and then come up to 0 and 0 itself out. You can do a self-test on this once it's plugged in. I can't remember if it does 120 and then it comes down in increments of 25. I want to say the last time I saw it do it, it was like 100, 75, 50, 25. So yeah, and then you'll just adjust it as needed. We read out speed on a GPS camera, as well as we've checked it with GPS tracking devices like Waze. Anything that you have that'll read out speed, you can double check your speedometer readings. And then you can also use your digital readout. We hardly ever use the digital readout, but I'm not saying that you can't do that. So you can. We generally check it with 3 different readings. So digital speed output, our dash camera, and then if we need to, we do it with our GPS like map. All right, so here you can see we've got everything hooked up. We don't have the clear lens on the gauge cluster, just so that we can make sure that our gauges are on, all of them. So you may need to do the self-test procedure several times, but this is a way that you can test the gauges to make sure that the needles are lined up. It should sweep most of them to like the high, full, high over here and high over here, and then it'll do increments, and so you can kind of see where your speedometer, your tach, all that stuff returns back to, and it should return back to 0 with the ignition on. If it doesn't, you just need to make incremental adjustments, and then obviously go and check it while driving for your speedometer. So this is generally how we do it. You hold the down button as you turn the ignition on. It'll go through its self-test, and then when it's done, it'll just go to this splash screen right here. So let's go ahead and do that and look at the gauges. Oh. So here you go. So generally, from what I've seen, like the fuel gauge, it's a little bit off. It reads a little bit high at half full. The temperature reads a little bit high as well, and then returns back to the cold. You can adjust that if you want to, and get it as close as possible. So we may end up doing a few more adjustments on this, but this is pretty darn close, and we'll probably adjust it a little bit further, but this is how I would adjust it. I can't speak for other shops, but this is how I would do it. Alright guys, that's going to do it for the stuck or sticking instrument cluster needles. These stepper motors can vary based off of instrument cluster type, premium or base model, whether you have a clear shaft or metal shaft. So please hit the link below to Tanin Auto for your repair parts, and then reference this video for repair questions if you need. Hope this helped you guys. I know it definitely worked out in our favor and saved us about $1,200. So happy repair.